All yours, brother.
Hi, I'm Doug. I'm a recovered alcoholic. And Eric, thank you for asking. Eric came and helped me out the other night. One of our lined up speaker had a tragedy in the family and could make it. So I reached out and Eric said, I'll do it. And that just tells me, the type of character that Eric is. And I've heard him before, and I've always same thing. Feelings mutual. We have this little clusters of twos and threes and tens of us that have gone through this process and studied this book, know what the book is about, have been through the process laid out in this book, and had this experience, and now are trying to carry this message to others. Which is the whole point of this, right? So, my sobriety date is April 24th, 1998. I hit a sufficient bottom where I could not continue on. And I knew of AA. I had come in before and stumbled in and sat in some meetings, and as beaten up as I was, I still, was not done. I thought if I just get away from those people and just, sober up for a bit, if I can just get sober for like a week, just get away from it, pluck me out of my life and just put me somewhere else and I'll be okay. Once, because I knew that my drinking had progressed to a place that it's not the way it was when it started, but now I'm out of control and I don't know how to get control again. And so I kind of heard what was going on, and finally I started to sit in some meetings, and someone said, just make 90 meetings in 90 days, just keep coming back, and I did that, but I didn't do a whole lot more. Not a whole lot more was presented to me either, but I still in the back of my mind believe that, I thought that if I just get the alcohol and the drugs out of me, sufficiently detoxed, I'll be okay. And that was pretty much what happened. I hung around for like 88 days or something like that. I had a guy, who offered to be my sponsor that I wasn't too keen about. And, I just, yeah, okay, whatever, and he was talking incessantly about things I had no idea or didn't care about. And then it got to, it was around, I don't know, 60 days. I looked, I was like, holy cow, I've been sober for 60 days. But again, it was squirrely. I was making a lot of these meetings, and I was, I was changing the way I drove to the meetings. I couldn't get down main streets and past the bars I used to go to, and I couldn't go by that guy's house because we used to do things together. And I was in trouble. And along with the short, I ended up going back out again, and I stayed out there for about another 10 months or so. And again, was brought to my knees in my apartment, again on my knees, saying, God, how did this happen? You gotta help me, either take me out of this or give me help. And I went to a meeting the next day, and I walked up to this crusty old guy that I shied away from in the meetings, and but I had this willingness at that moment that I knew that if I didn't grab onto somebody, I was going to die. There was no question in my mind I was going to die. And that desperation, that is so critical for an alcoholic like me. I'm not going to do anything unless don't tell me what to do until I have no other choice. And then my ears pop open, and this willingness allows me to do something outside of my own thinking. And I asked this guy to sponsor me, and he did, and he took me through the steps to the best of his ability. And in that time, this group, we were considered a progressive group. We did a step a month. Maybe some of you guys know about those types of groups, and there's nothing wrong with them. And if it works, God bless. But I went through the steps, and it was painful. It was a long, long time. And somewhere around, step 9, I guess, the obsession to drink and use was fully lifted, where I sat back and thought, and I was like, wow, it's been a whole week I haven't thought about a drink. I haven't thought about a drink in an entire week. Whereas up until that point, it was pretty much every day. And again, I was making meetings morning, noon, and night. They worked when I was in the meetings, they would say, well, I was struggling with this idea of a higher power. And they said, well, look, when you're in a meeting, you feel better after the meeting. And I'd say, yeah, I do. He says, do you think that had anything to do with you? And I said, no. And so it started with just simply that something was happening in these meetings. And but it had a short shelf life. You know, it was only good for a couple hours, and then I was crazy again. So I went through the steps, and we got up to the 12th step. My sponsor said to now, you know, help other people. And I did. I reached out to people and I tried to sponsor the people, again, to the best of my ability, based on the experience that I had from my sponsor, which was the best experience he had with his sponsor. But again, different than really what the book says, you know, and slightly different, certainly. Um, and uh, and I remained, you know, abstinent. I remained abstinent, and I thought that, you know, was I sober? I guess at moments I was sober or emotionally sober. I was carrying the message. I was actively, you know, service in AA. I was the treasurer. I was, you know, chaired meetings. I did all the jobs, but I really wasn't working with others the way the book tells me that I should. And that's what the point of the program is. I really thought it was about me stopping drinking so I can get my life back and get back on track to getting what I think I need to make me happy. And life got full. I mean, I got married, you know, I kind of fell into a job that later became a career, and we had kids, and you know, and it got busy. It got really busy. I continued to make meetings though. You know, I made usually about 5 meetings a week or so, but I was not working with anybody. If someone walked up to me in the meetings, like a young guy walked up and said, I heard you share and I really want you to be my sponsor, I'd say, oh, okay, go home and read these chapters. You know, but there was no way. I wasn't walking up to anybody or approaching anybody. I wasn't actively seeking out people to carry a message because I really didn't have a great message to share. Other than I had been through the steps, kind of did the rudimentary actions here. I made amends, and the obsession had left, but I was still not really convinced of a few key points, you know, that they talk about in the book. It was working. I was not drinking, but I can't say that I was sober, certainly not emotionally sober. So as time goes on, you know, I'm married and we've got kids and we both got busy careers. And I've got this just sustained level of irritability, you know, that sometimes, you know, showed up as anger or rage, even, you know, judgment, resentment, fear, you know, a lot of the common manifestations of self uh, that I would just attribute to, well, it's my job, and it's my wife. If she would just, you know, stick to the plan she agreed to, you know, we'd be okay, or, you know, whatever. I had all these reasons why it was everything else except really anything to do with me. And my wife and I kind of started growing apart, you know, and she would look at me and she'd say, you know, sometimes I look at you and I just don't know who you are. There's this anger, this rage that comes over you. You look possessed. And I would sit back and I go, you know what? She'd catch me in those moments. I'd say, you know, you're right. I just have this absolute rage in me, and I had no idea where it was coming from. You know, and it came out, you know, against my kids. You know, it was horrible. The harm I did sober was far greater than anything I did drinking. And so here I am trying to figure my way out of this, you know, and I can't, and things are not getting better. And somewhere around 2017, about this time of year, my wife came home and said she had a pain in her side, and long or the short, she got diagnosed with cancer. And about a year later, in fact, a year to today, she passed away. And I found myself riddled with this self-pity, with this anger, this resentment, you know, I was crushed, I was crippled, I was just so lost, and I had no clue what to do. So I went to this meeting in New Rochelle, which is a couple towns over from me. I'm in the New York metro area, out on the border of Connecticut, and I live in Harrison. And I went over to a couple towns over to New Rochelle, and there was this meeting that I had gone to before, and it was a Saturday morning meeting, and I liked it because it was quick. It was short, succinct, to the point. They had time shares where people couldn't drone on forever, and I like that. And I went to this meeting and I see this guy, Anthony, who's on here today. And I'm just, I mean, I'm sitting there and I just suddenly start crying, out of nowhere. And I'm a mess. And he looks at me, he says, how you doing? I said, hanging in there. And he said, well, listen, he said, we take people through the steps and we do it quick and maybe you'll have an experience. You want to give it a shot. And I said, thank you very much. It's really kind of you. I've been through the steps a bunch of the time. I've been, sober a while and had a bunch of different sponsors, and it's really kind of you, And he said, well, I mean, you really got nothing to lose. And I was in the same boat. I was 18 years sober and really didn't understand what these steps were about until my sponsor came back and took me back through them after he had a new experience with them. And he convinced me to give it a try because I had nothing to lose and I was desperate again. On page 15 in Bill's story, it says, for if an alcoholic failed to enlarge and perfect his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he will surely, not be able to handle the certain low spots and trials ahead. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. And that's exactly what had happened to me. The low spots and trials had come, the crippling life event to me, and I was unable to manage it. I lacked the necessary tools and resources and access to power that I required to surmount this problem, this obstacle. So I went back through the book with Anthony and a couple of guys there, and we sat in the back room and we did it quick. It was like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 days, something like that. And we started going line by line, word by word, sentence by sentence. And he started pointing things out that were just like, it was like I was reading a new book. And I'd read this book through and through at big book meetings. We'd read an entire chapter and everybody would share, and usually not about what I'm talking about by the time it kind of evolved out to people who talk about whatever. But I read these pages over and over again, but I really didn't understand what they were saying. Or maybe I was unwilling to comprehend it. I don't know, but I like Russell Spatz is a speaker that I like. He says, when an alcoholic hears something or is told something he doesn't like, it confuses him. I think a lot of the pages of the book confused me. I just didn't understand what they meant by that. There were so many places. What do they mean by that? And he took me through the book, and suddenly all this started to make sense. It became very clear. And the first off was I really didn't understand what I suffered from. I knew I couldn't drink. It was very clear that when my life had spiraled down to a point where I could not stop drinking. No matter what I did, I could not stop. But I didn't understand fully, what that meant. That there's the physical component that when I put alcohol in my system, it triggers this allergy. I get thirstier. And that suddenly made sense. Whereas I couldn't understand when I'd be out with the boys after work, planning to be home by 8 o'clock and just have a couple drinks and be home by 8 o'clock because I really want to be home by 8 o'clock. That suddenly 8 o'clock came and I'd say, well, I'm just going to have another one and I'll leave right after that. I didn't understand that the allergy, this phenomenon of craving, had developed when I put the first drink in me. I was no longer in control at that point. The alcohol was going to decide when I was going to leave. And I kept saying, well, why do I keep doing this over and over again? It's 2 o'clock in the morning and I got to be at work, or it's 4 o'clock in the morning, I got to be at work. Or it's not even time to sleep and I've got to be at work. And I could not understand. Well, then suddenly started to make sense. And I forget, one of the speakers said, I thought I was changing my mind. I tried to make sense of the night before later on, saying, well, so-and-so came in and we're playing pool and I hadn't seen him in a while. And we're just having such a good time, but no, it was a phenomenon of craving, this physical allergy that I have, that the alcohol just demands more alcohol. And then the other component is that when I'd stop drinking, I'd come out the other side and say, I'm not going to drink anymore. That's it. I'm changing my life. A couple of days would go by and suddenly my best thinking would tell me, what, it'd be okay to just have one. It'll be different this time. We're going to drink beer. I don't even like beer, but we'll drink it instead. This way we'll make sure we don't get crazy. And then I'd find myself right back in the same place. So the physical allergy, the obsession of the mind, that when I'm sober, my mind tells me to pick up a drink. brings me to this place where I now comprehend what powerlessness is. Is that my first step experience is not that I can't drink, it's that I'm gonna drink. And that was an epiphany. That was this understanding that I am so screwed unless I find a solution to this, my life, I'm gonna die. And someone said, and it was a great speaker, and I wish I could remember who it was, but he used this analogy that if I don't believe I suffer from this, well, I'm not likely going to take the actions necessary to address it. And he likened it to cancer. If I don't believe I have cancer, I'm not taking chemo. I'm not signing up for that. And so until I understand exactly what I suffer from, and that's what the first several chapters of the book talk about, it's just to find out whether we're real alcoholics or not. And the thing is that everybody's welcome in AA, and it's a wonderful program. And the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. Many people that come in may or may not be real alcoholics, and we don't really qualify them, or at least not in the group that I belong to. So we have people sharing their experience, which is that, who knows, maybe they got a few DWIs, some bad luck, some bad timing, but they don't suffer from this the way I do. They don't suffer from the obsession of the mind, the physical allergy. They make some stupid choices and ran into some speed traps. I don't know. But they don't have to do the same things that I have to do. So not drinking and just go to meetings might work for them, but not for this alcohol. And I need to understand what this program is about, and to be able to carry that message, the message that's in this book. So understanding who and what I am, what I suffer from, and then that sets me up with this willingness to, what's the solution? You have a solution? Tell me about it. What do I got to do? Because I'm going to die. And if I don't get myself to that place, or when I work with other people, get them to that place, then they're likely not going to take the actions necessary either. So it's really important, to understand, am I a real alcoholic or not? Because that's what this book is geared toward, the real alcoholic. So I go back through this book, and I start to have these awakenings, and these understandings, and I start going through the steps again. They spend the next several pages talking about, when we get into we agnostics, and this was a big one, that this whole idea of God and prejudice, these things that keep me from having this experience with God, and what's holding me back. And because I believed in God, but I did not really rely on God. And I wasn't quite sure how much God I wanted in my life, because I still had such a big ego at play. I'll give God my drinking, but, entirely abandon, utterly, hold on there. And as we go through that chapter, we start breaking it down. I start seeing how, I worship all kinds of things. I think I'm incapable of worship, but I worship my own reason. That's the only thing I'm absolutely, completely sold on is the ability of my own thought and reasoning. But when I look back and see how's that worked out for me, I have no reason to want to worship or believe in that. And so it takes apart my thinking and all the things that separate me from having this open-mindedness that's required to go down this road and potentially have this experience that can change my life. And the authors are begging me as I go through this to say, look, you have nothing to lose. We disregard our old ideas for new ones in all kinds of situations, whether it be a new gadget or electronic or an iPhone, a flip phone. You can't show me an iPhone, I'm tossing that other thing. I don't need to understand how it works. The bottom line is it does work. And that's in my experience here. I don't have to understand God to have a relationship with God and to allow him to work in my life. And that's what that was about, and still, today I constantly have to examine, in the areas of my life where I'm agnostic. Where am I restricting God on a daily basis? So I start to move into step 3 and 4, and these questions come up. We talked about the central fact, and that was great, Eric. I love that. The central fact and the great fact. When we take people through the book, we take them through pretty quickly. And we give them some homework, and we ask them to read these pages. We ask them to look for the 4 facts in those pages: the central fact, great fact, the fact is, there's another one, I forget which one it is, but the great fact that we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences that have revolutionized our entire outlook toward life, toward God, to our fellows. This is what the authors are telling me, is that the central fact is that God has come into our lives and lives in a way that is indeed miraculous, that he has accomplished to do the things that I could never do by myself. So I start to learn that this book is not a novel. It's not a piece of history that we hold up to our ancestors. This is a manual, which I never knew. It contains these directions that, if followed precisely, will allow me to have this experience that the first 100 the authors wrote about. They're saying, hey, if you follow this the way we did, you can have the same thing, but I've got to follow it precisely. So this whole understanding of what this book is, it's not the treasure, but it's a map to the treasure. It's a roadmap. And if I follow it and use it in that manner, great things, will come to pass for me and countless others. And that's the point here. So I go through the steps again, and I get into my 4th step. And my first 4th step was kind of an autobiography, because I went to my sponsor back at the time and I said, I really don't understand these columns. They're kind of confusing. And he says, yeah, me too. Just write an autobiography. That's what I did. And so there was 18 pages of nonsense. I shouldn't say it was nonsense. It was a lot of me. It was all about me. But I started to see these repetitive patterns. And I started to see the selfishness in my behavior, but I didn't get a whole lot deeper than that. I started to see that I was, the common denominator in all these situations, and these places where I had resentment. I did try to kind of use the chart and try to stitch it through, but it was sufficient for me to get a clear understanding of exactly who and what I am. And with that came this desire to become something different, to not be that person. And I think that's, why I was able to have, a little spiritual awakening the first time through, sufficient to overcome, this hopeless state of mind and body. But as I went back through it again, we did a much more detailed inventory, and it wasn't hard. Was shown to me. It was really, really easy. It was multiple choice columns. I just had to check the answers that applied. And then we go back over them, and I start to see how, everything there isn't a wasted word in this book. As I start to go back through these pages, I see that every single word in there describes my thinking, my behavior, how I'm going to think about the step, or how I am presently thinking about the situation. And it gives me all the reasons why, and warnings, conditions to meet, promises if I follow directions. And so we go through the 4th step, and I do my 5th step and share it with God and another individual. And then I sit quietly for an hour, which I never did. And that was something that was that moment, that hour of contemplation with me and God, this entity that I wasn't quite sure wanted me. As I came to find out later, it wasn't that I didn't really believe in him. I was afraid that I wasn't good enough, that he wouldn't want me. And when I got over that whole idea, that if God wanted me dead, he would have smote me a long time ago, that he was willing to accept me, warts and all, that as long as I'm willing to work along the lines and grow in understanding and seek and do his will, that he will continue to work in my life. And that's the truth, for me today, is to try to stay in this process, and to stay working, and doing his will. What's his will for me today? Certainly to be sober, to stay sober, but to work with others. That was the key ingredient. They have a whole chapter, dedicated to that. But that was when I met with Anthony, he said to me, he said, how many people are you sponsoring? And I looked at him like he had 2 heads. Sponsoring people? Don't you understand? Didn't you just hear what's going on in my life? And I understand now that no matter what is going on, the answer is always working with other people. Whatever I think is going on in my life, one, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do about it. And two, the only way out of it is to allow God to get working on my life and to get me out of the way. And the one way that I can be useful is to find another alcoholic to work with. So we go fishing, So just to kind of circling all over the place, but so we continue through the steps, and we get to step 10. And I never knew that you're supposed to take inventory on a daily basis. I thought you had the spot check inventory, which is where if I blow up at somebody online or cut somebody off and I feel badly about it, then later I'll go to God and ask him for forgiveness or take away these desires. I thought it was just that, this belly barometer we used to talk about, that I kind of know when I've done wrong, but that's not what it's about. It's a daily practice. In fact, all through the day. It tells me when I retire at night, upon awakening, and all through the day. There's only 3 times I got to pray. And that pretty much covers the whole gamut. So then into 11 and 12, 11, my goal is to try to get closer to God through prayer and meditation. That I've tapped into this source of power that's working in my life, and it's miraculous. I can't understand, don't define it, but as long as I make myself available to it and work at it, I continue to have a deeper experience with God. And then in step 12, to carry this message and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So now that I've gone through this process, keep doing it. 10, 11, and 12 keep me in the game, as Earl Hightower says. Keeps me in the game. And continue to do things, all the things I've done in 1 through 9 on a daily basis. But this working with others was really a critical part. When I first got through the steps the next time around, I said, I'm not quite sure I'm confident about doing this the way you did it, so well, I'll just hang out in the meetings and I'll jump in where I can and add. And he looked at me and he said, Doug, what did I do with you? And I said, well, we read the book. He said, so just read the book with somebody. It's not that difficult. Now you understand it a little better. You'll understand it more as you work with somebody else. And that's been the truth, is that as inadequate as I felt about this new experience that I've had, it's like I read a whole new book. I have a whole new experience, a whole new program. I didn't even understand what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous was really all about. And now I'm kind of befuddled. I've been around for over 20 years at that point, and I'm like a newcomer. And he said, just do it. Just go find somebody to read, take them through the chapters, just like I did with you. And you will get a better understanding. You'll get more comfortable through practice. And that's what we've been doing since the pandemic. Actually a little before the pandemic. But when the pandemic hit, we were no longer meeting in person. We went online, and we've stayed online. We're far more effective online. We have a smaller group of people that, after, I don't know about meetings where you guys are, but I don't know, the attendance is definitely different. It's certainly a lot lower. Some of our meetings have just disappeared altogether. But where we can be most effective is with people that are looking for a solution. And we've been very effective online. So if you haven't been through the steps, or you've been through the steps, but you're not feeling rocketed into the 4th dimension of existence, you can reach out to one of us. There's a few of us on here. That's all we do. We take you back through the steps. So you're welcome to join. And that's what I continue to do. I do this imperfectly at best, and I find myself just coming out of a place where I had so many chat groups and so many meeting groups and messages, and that I was getting overstimulated, and I started not responding to any of them, and I knew that wasn't a good place. I just started turning off bells and whistles, and I'm like, why? I'm overloaded. And I got to a place where I found myself, I wasn't taking inventory every night. I was skipping nights. And that's the beginning for me, So I got back into it. I grabbed my inventory sheet and started filling it out again. And the great news is it's really easy to get back on track, Last night I was driving home from Oneonta, New York. Went up to see my son, who's in college, play football. Got to play a whole 3 minutes of the game at the end. It was worth the 3.5-hour drive each way, which it was. But on the way back, this long drive, I jump on an AA meeting and I just fish. That's what we do. We go fishing. I'll jump into a random meeting and one certainly sounds like it maybe needs to hear a message, and I try to share that message. And I've been pretty successful finding people that way. In fact, really successful. It's amazing how many meetings out there, unfortunately, aren't talking about the message laid out in the book. Um, Talking about a lot of other things, but not necessarily um, those life-saving, uh, those that will save your life. So I don't know how much more I have in me. You know, again, desperation made me willing. You know, and when the students are ready, the teachers appear. And I was blessed that Anthony was there. I know there's nothing short of divine intervention here. I was I was at a bad place in life, and it was exactly what I needed was get right back into this book. Um, and it's given me, a new, I've had, I feel new power flow in, never before experience. It's not an old, it's something completely new, because I never really availed myself to this program completely. And whatever was holding me back, which was really my self pride, my ego, um, my unwillingness to let go completely. Because whether it be fear of the unknown or whatever it was, I had to get to a place where I didn't care. I was willing to give it a shot, and I'm so grateful that God saw fit to get me there. And as a process of going through these steps, really simply, it dismantles all the blocks that separate me from God, from you, and from my fellows. So, what a wonderful life, I have in front of me every single day, the opportunity for it. And I'm so grateful to be here and to be here with you. So, thank you so much.